There's a mountain in Iran that nobody can bomb, a phone call Trump says happened that Tehran won't confirm, and a threat about power plants and bridges that dropped just hours ago. Put those three things together, and you get one of the strangest, most revealing moments of this entire war, and almost none of it is being connected in one place until right now. It started with a claim that should have been the headline of the week, but got buried under everything else happening at once. Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that Iran had reached out, not through official channels, not through a public statement. He said Iran badly wants to make a deal, that after American forces hit them hard, they called looking for a way out. His exact words were blunt. "We hit them 20-1. Every time they hit us, we're going to hit them 20, and we did it last night." Then, almost as an aside, he mentioned Iran had come calling. Here's the part that should stop you cold. Iran's own government never confirmed that. Their foreign ministry said talks were ongoing, sure, but a deal was, in their words, not close. So you have the President of the United States publicly claiming a private admission of weakness from a government that, in public, is doing everything it can to look like it isn't weak at all. This wouldn't be the first time a claim like that hung in the air without confirmation. Throughout this entire conflict, Trump has repeatedly announced diplomatic breakthroughs, ceasefires, and private admissions from Tehran, only for the actual, verifiable details to lag behind or contradict what was said publicly within days. It's a pattern worth watching for, because if history here has taught us anything, it's that the gap between what Trump says is happening behind closed doors and what Iran is willing to confirm in public tells you almost as much about this war as the strikes themselves. That contradiction alone would be enough to build an entire story around. But it gets stranger, because this wasn't even the first 11th hour moment of this exact standoff. Weeks earlier, as Trump was genuinely weighing whether to resume full-scale war, the head of Pakistan's military, Field Marshal Asim Munir, made an emergency trip to Tehran, described at the time as an 11th hour effort to bridge the gaps and stop the fighting from restarting. A Qatari delegation showed up the same day to help. Munir was scheduled to meet directly with the commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, one of the most powerful men inside the entire Iranian military structure. Behind closed doors in Washington, sources close to Trump said he'd told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu he wanted to give diplomacy one more shot, then, within 48 hours, was leaning toward ordering strikes anyway. One source described him considering a single, final, quote, decisive operation, after which he could simply declare victory and end the war on his own terms. It's worth pausing on just how unusual that sequence really is. A nuclear-armed military chief from a third country flying directly into the capital of a nation at war, meeting with the exact commander overseeing that country's most powerful paramilitary force, all while the American president is privately debating hour by hour whether to blow the entire effort up with a single massive strike. That is not how ordinary diplomacy looks. That is crisis management happening in real time, with the fate of the negotiation shifting depending on which conversation the president had most recently walked out of. Notice the pattern building here. Every single time this conflict edges toward resuming, there's a flurry of secret meetings, foreign mediators rushing in, and Trump publicly signaling both diplomacy and imminent violence in almost the same breath. It happened in May with Pakistan's military chief. It happened again in July with Trump's own claim about a private outreach from Tehran. And it's happening again right now, because just hours ago, Trump convened his entire senior national security team in the Situation Room, Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Defense Secretary Hegseth, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, all in one room, discussing what officials are calling a massive new wave of strikes on Iran. And this is where the story takes its strangest turn yet, because Trump didn't just talk about more bombs. He revealed something almost nobody outside defense circles had heard of before, a place called Pickaxe Mountain. According to Trump, American and Israeli intelligence believe Iran may be using this deep underground facility to continue its nuclear program, specifically because officials think it's built to withstand airstrikes entirely, buried far enough beneath solid rock that conventional bunker busters might not be able to reach it. Then Trump said something that should genuinely unsettle you. Nobody knows if they even are doing anything in Pickaxe. It's just something that comes up. Read that again. The President of the United States is publicly discussing a potential nuclear site so secretive that even he isn't certain what's actually happening inside it. In the same breath as claiming America's most powerful bunker-busting weapons can, quote, go deep enough to hit it anyway. Think about how strange it is for a name like that to surface for the first time in a Situation Room readout rather than a formal intelligence briefing. A mountain that may or may not house the exact capability this war was supposedly fought to eliminate dropped almost casually into a conversation about power plants and bridges as if it were an afterthought rather than potentially the single most important target in the entire conflict. If Pickaxe Mountain really is what officials suspect, it would represent Iran's last remaining card in this entire standoff, the one piece of leverage that survived every round of strikes so far. And if it isn't, then the mere mention of it becomes its own kind of pressure campaign, forcing Iran to either prove a negative or let the uncertainty work in America's favor. So think about what's actually sitting on the table right now, all at once. A president claiming Iran secretly wants peace, while publicly threatening to knock out their power plants and bridges within days if they don't come to the table. The mysterious mountain that may or may not hide the exact nuclear capability this entire war was supposedly fought to eliminate, that the president himself admits nobody can fully confirm. And a diplomatic history littered with 11th hour meetings, foreign mediators, and secret conversations that keep almost working right up until they don't. Because remember, this isn't the first time a deal supposedly got close either. Back in June, Trump signed a 14-point memorandum of understanding with Iran, standing in front of cameras declaring the nuclear issue permanently resolved and peace brought to the Middle East for what he called the first time in 3,000 years. Behind the scenes, according to people familiar with the process, his own negotiators, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, were fielding skeptical questions from Republican leaders almost immediately, because the language in that agreement was vague enough that nobody in Washington was entirely sure what Iran had actually agreed to. Sources familiar with the process say career government experts, the people with decades of experience negotiating exactly this kind of complex nuclear agreement, were only consulted intermittently in the months leading up to the signing. A sharp contrast to how the Obama-era Iran nuclear deal was built years earlier, with entire agencies working the details for years before a single signature. 3 weeks later, that same agreement was, in Trump's own words, over. So here's where this actually leaves us. Every 11th hour meeting in this war has produced the same outcome: a temporary sense of relief, followed by a collapse nobody fully explains, followed by another wave of strikes, followed by another secret meeting, followed by another claim that this time, finally, Iran is ready to fold. Trump is once again threatening power plants and bridges next week if Tehran doesn't negotiate. Somewhere underground, in a mountain most of the world had never heard of until a few hours ago, there may or may not be exactly the kind of nuclear capability that started this entire war in the first place. And once again, nobody, not the negotiators, not the intelligence officials, not even the president making the threats, seems entirely certain which version of this story is actually true, the one where Iran is quietly begging for peace, or the one where the bombs are about to fall on power plants within the week.